I'm delighted to move on to Adam Donnan, who is from the Institution of Environmental Sciences, and is going to be talking about equality, diversity and inclusion, implementation in a challenging environment. So Adam, if you're happy to share your screen, that would be wonderful. Thank you. See that beautifully now. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. So as Liz mentioned, my name is Adam Donnan. I'm the Chief Executive of the IES and Chair of the Science Council. CHES is the educational arm of the IES, just to explain that relationship. Alison's excellent talk covered inclusion within the new benchmark statement. My talk is zooming out a bit and thinking about ED&I across the whole environmental sector. It focuses primarily on ethnic diversity, as this was identified as an area of concern for the sector. But I'm sure chairs and the IES are going to, over the coming years, address other areas of diversity. And I think it's important to look right across the sector, because this is not just a challenge for education, it's a challenge for the whole of the environment sector, thinking about inspiring from a primary age right up into employment policies within the professions themselves. Today I'm going to be talking about two recent reports and what they might tell us about ethnic diversity in the environment sector. And I'm going to conclude with a few plans that chairs and the IES have to address the ethnic diversity gap. Some of it's directly related to education, other bits to the profession, but hopefully it should all be of interest. So these are the two reports I'll be talking about. The first report is called A Challenging Environment, Experiences of Ethnic Minority Environmental Professionals. That was a culmination of a year-long study by the IES and was published back in March of this year. And the other report is from Students Organising for Sustainability, which I'll use the acronym SOS UK from now on, supported by NERC and IEMA. And that looks at a lot of data taken from workforce data and from HESA statistics. This one's a bit better on education and the student and students' opinions, and the IS one is stronger on the professions. That's why I'm talking about both of them. So in terms of baselines of ethnic diversity within the sector, the comparator is that across all UK professions, 12.6% of the workforce are from non-white background. And what kind of kicked off a lot of the thinking and was really a wake-up call for the sector was a policy exchange report back in 2017 that noted that it thought that 3.1% of the environmental workforce came from a non-white background, and that was the second. That made it the second least diverse profession in the UK after farming. That data set was also used by the SOS UK report and updated to 2022, and it thought that about 4.8% of the workforce came from a non-white background. So potentially some progress, although I think there was probably a tiny bit of a change about the methodology. I've said thought in both cases because workforce data is incredibly difficult to analyse because it doesn't go down to the kind of granularity that one would hope. So another possible proxy for looking at diversity in the sector is looking at the membership of the IES itself. And we have been participating in the joint Royal Academy of Engineering and Science Council Diversity and Inclusion Framework for a number of years now. And that has meant that for some time we've been monitoring and publishing data on our own membership, which we gather by asking new members and existing members to fill in diversity surveys. So this is a good proxy, but again, it has some difficulties as it adds to the context about us as an organisation and whether we might be better or worse at attracting a diverse membership. Unfortunately as well, the environmental professional body landscape is quite fragmented, so not all environmental professionals are members of the IES. But you can see that there's quite a range there between 4.8% taken from the workforce data and 9.7% in the IES's UK membership. And it may be that the IS numbers are higher because we have a relatively young makeup of our membership with an average age of 38, or that the overall picture for environmental sciences might be marginally better than the sub-areas of environmental sciences that are sometimes kind of picked out as being particularly undiverse, such as forestry or conservation. The SOS UK report also talks about diversity of the student body. So the comparator is 26% across all subjects, and in the ones that it picked out as being environmental subjects, the range was between 6% for, I believe that was for biodiversity conservation, up to 14%, which was for applied environmental sciences, but you see well below that 26%. So the problem isn't just restricted to the profession, but also to the pipeline that's coming into environmental degrees in HE. The SOS UK report also looked at the percentage of academic staff working in UK HE, and again, a gap, 9% coming from a non-white background versus 16% across all academic staff. At the IES, we think it's important to frame diversity not just as a tick box exercise, it's both a moral and economic imperative, and without it, innovation is stifled, and we risk imperiling the transformative change that society needs to go through over the next 30 years if we're to hit any of our net zero targets or to reverse biodiversity loss. And it's very important that the environmental community reflects the diversity of the society that it's supporting. So starting off with the SOS UK report, it spends a lot of time trying to unpick underrepresentation in HE, and it gives a lot of statistics. I found the report a little frustrating in that it doesn't attempt to come to any conclusions about them, so it's up to the reader to try and work out a narrative of what the stats are telling them. And a lot of the charts throughout the report really don't come to a clear conclusion about the factors that might be affecting underrepresentation in HE, because some of the charts don't really show a difference between the factors affecting course and subject choice. They don't really hugely vary between white British students and those from Black, Asian, mixed, Arab or Latin, South or Central American backgrounds. Nor do the statistics about their desire to work in the sector don't seem significant in any way. And you can see, you know, this slide is one of the representations of them asking people after they're given a definition of the environment sector about how attractive it is, and there really isn't a difference between students from those backgrounds. Both the IES and the SOS UK surveys do suffer from small sample sizes, which I think is inevitable in what is quite a small sector. I've picked out a couple over the next slides of areas where I do think there is a bit of a difference between the answer, and you can see here on line 2 about perceptions of having the right qualifications to work in the sector, and on line 7 here about skills. I don't think I can use the skills I've developed in the sector. There does seem to be a quite substantive difference. So that is certainly an area that needs to be addressed in any work, is about applicability of skills. And you can see there is no less enthusiasm. In fact, there's more enthusiasm despite all of these factors to work in the environmental sector. Other factors that may contribute to a lack of representation in the sector is factors such as a desire not to work in the countryside and a lack of peer representation in the sector. People from different backgrounds can have different experiences growing up. Due to the distribution of minority communities in the UK, it is more likely that they've had an urban rather than rural upbringing. And that means their experiences of the environment may be a bit different. But I think the environmental sector is now diverse enough that actually there is a lot of environmental concerns, rural concerns around our urban concerns around air quality and greening of the urban environment, that shouldn't lead to underrepresentation in the long run. But having read the report, those looking for a silver bullet of one thing that we need to tweak about our programme delivery or the way in which the sector markets itself are probably going to be disappointed. You know, there's a whole series of things that we're going to have to do in the ED&I space to address this underrepresentation. Moving on to the Ies report, this focused on the profession itself and the experiences of professionals within it. It was a mixed methodology study that had both surveys and interviews. And I think the interesting and unique thing about this study was it also talked to ED&I professionals within employers and with heads of organisations about their perception of ED&I issues. As a report, I think it's well worth not skipping the appendix, where a lot of the feedback from the interviews is recorded verbatim. And that almost is the most interesting part. And some of it is really actually quite shocking about some of the experiences that ethnic minorities have faced within the sector. So well worth looking at that section. So the overall findings from the studies was that there had been a significant number of increased initiatives in the last 2 years, but the general consensus was that there still was not enough being done. The use of meritocracy was sometimes used as a counter argument to the whole ED&I attempts that, you know, we have an exactly fair process for all candidates, no matter what background they came from. And the report really challenges that concept of meritocracy as being sometimes biased towards particular communities. So it's not the kind of get out cause that some employers think that it is. Also disappointment from a lot of candidates about the ED&I initiatives that take place within the workforce, that they felt they were more about companies trying to look a certain way to an external organisation and not really being about the desires of staff that are currently within the company. So a lot of focus on recruitment policies, for example, less about professional development and promotion within an organisation. And there's lots of examples over there of people from minority backgrounds being passed over for promotion, being given less exposure to training, being excluded from certain social groups, either not being given a voice or not being listened to, or being felt that they were the token non-white person within discussions. So the report comes up with a lot of recommendations, both for the sector, for employers and for individuals themselves. I haven't got time today to go through all of those. And the key takeaways really are focusing on organisation culture, as well as recruitment and career progression processes.
Sorry, Adam, you've just got a minute or so left. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bex. It also throws up a lot of recommendations. System change is incredibly difficult, and we as an organisation don't tend to have all of the answers. And there is a need for some further research, education and reform to identify and address key barriers which result in low ethnic diversity across the sector. And, you know, the factors that inspire those from ethnic minority backgrounds to pursue a career as an environmental professional. We want to continue researching the issue within the environment sector, particularly around intersectionality. Gender and ethnicity is a very interesting question that the report doesn't really address. But we also believe that now is the time for action. So it's time for educators, employers and professional bodies to really take proactive steps to create an environmental profession that is accessible for any individual, irrespective of their background or circumstances. And we believe it's important to promote a culture of inclusivity where barriers are identified and solutions sought to dismantle them. in terms of education, what we're planning on doing, so CHES and the IES are both outward-looking organisations who believe that they're here to facilitate system change, and we've identified that universities need to do more to ensure that their environmental programmes are inclusive and that they're attracting a diverse student pool. So the process that we're going through as an organisation at the moment is about identifying best practice in this area. And we've been doing that for about 2 years now, collecting data from our accredited programs through the accreditation process, and from that we'll synthesize best practice, talking to a lot of organizations and doing a stakeholder engagement event. And what we're expecting to do in the near future is to come up with some best practice that will be published for our accredited programs, and then have a program of advocacy to the universities that we accredit. And the idea in the longer term is that we will embed this into our accreditation standards to ensure that all of our accredited universities have embedded this into practice. And we recognise that this is an iterative process, that best practice changes over time. We'll learn from the programs that we're accredited, and we'll try and transfer that practice across the community. I provided some links in my slides as well, which will add to the ones that Alison gave a moment ago, and the slides will be circulated afterwards. There'll be a chance to click through on some of these, and there are some coalitions forming to address some of this. And there is a NERC-funded project called the Equator Project, which deals with justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in geography, earth, and environmental sciences, which includes a mentoring network, research school, and a working group. So that's another source to have a look into. Thank you.
Many thanks, Adam. That was an incredibly valuable overview, so very much appreciated.